Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here with us.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jesse. I'm excited.
Good. Well, just to start, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what you write about.
I'm Lizbeth Meredith. I am an author and I do some speaking and online teaching. I write nonfiction work a lot. I write about domestic violence and resilience, but I also write some fiction as well.
Awesome. Domestic violence and things like that, is that something that you do for your work? Like, do you have a background in mental health, or is that more of a personal interest for you?
You know what? It is a personal experience of mine that led to professional development. And then finally, I got an advanced degree in psychology. So then I worked as a domestic violence advocate and for 20 years as a juvenile probation supervisor.
That's amazing. I work in the mental health space as well, in a different sector, but it's always so nice to connect with people who have a similar passion for helping people in those traumatic situations. So thank you for the work that you've done.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. I'm glad you're continuing it too. It's so exciting.
Definitely. So walk us through your writing process. What were some of the things that you struggled with? Maybe that prevented you from getting started or prevented you from finishing your manuscript?
Jesse, I feel like I was plagued with feelings of inadequacy. And a lot of times, if a person such as myself, I was very young when I started writing, and I was a single mom and sole supporter of two little girls. And I kept getting the message, you have to show up to the page every day. You have to make it a discipline. You can't ever, you're never going to get anywhere if you don't do it all the time. And frankly, I was working two jobs, going to school. Sometimes I had a paper route. It wasn't possible. And so I felt inadequate, not good enough, and certainly not talented enough.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, what I learned was you could literally just, if you kept persisting and kept writing, that I could take notes on a bill, right, of ideas that came to my head about scenes while I was watching my kids' soccer games.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't have to be every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you hear that message, especially in like the entrepreneurial community, of get up at 5 a.m. and write for an hour and just crank it out. And it's like, that's so hard because people
Right.
have lives and people work on different schedules. And I know something that a lot of my students come to me with is they're like, okay, I'm writing about health and wellness or business or whatever it is. And they're like, there are all these giants in the field that have so much more experience than me.
Right.
Why is my voice, worth sharing? Was that something you encountered, and how did you kind of work through that?
Absolutely. I kept feeling like, who am I to be talking about this experience? Yes, I was a victim of domestic violence. I became a survivor, but there are zillions, frankly. And, I'm not Hemingway. And so I kept plugging along and then stopping. And then finally I was in a book group, not a writer's group. I was in those too, but I was in a book group, and someone selected a book that I wasn't interested in. And it was Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. It's not the kind of book that I typically read at the time. And so I had to read it for my book group. And there was this one chapter on the rule of basically 10,000 hours, that anyone, if they give themselves enough grace and kept spending time on the thing that they wanted to master, upwards of 10,000 hours, they would get it. It's not about innate talent or some exclusive club or sorority or something. It's about giving yourself permission to stink and keep going on. And that for me was like a light bulb, a game changer.
Yeah, I love that interpretation of the 10,000 hour rule, because I've heard that, I think anyone who ever played sports growing up heard that as
Right.
well. But the way that it's often interpreted is like work
Right.
to get to this 10,000 hours. Whereas your perception is like, give yourself grace, give yourself time, give yourself the opportunity to grow. So I love that interpretation.
Oh, good. Thank you. It really helped because it's not some exclusive club that gets to write. It's all of us who are interested. And so just being able to do it as we can and know that it doesn't need to be one more punishment in our lives. I'm someone who also experiences a lot of anxiety, depression, mental health issues run in my family pretty strongly. And so I didn't need one more thing to make me feel bad about myself because they were already there. And so being able to write as a joy and not write when I didn't want to was fabulous.
Yes, absolutely. Switching topics slightly, or I guess direction slightly, what were some more of the strategies or tools that helped you go from that, okay, I want to write a book, to having that final draft? Any habits, outlining tricks, things like that?
You know what? I was not a great outliner. And to this day, outlining is not my superpower. However, I did write down, I still have it, a little pen note from like 1998 of the things I wanted my readers to take away from my story, the benefits to them. And so I just wrote it, and the ink is very much faded today, but those were critical in my mind. So the first time I wrote my draft, it was like 200,000 words. And that was about 120,000 words too many. So I gave myself permission to go to critique groups and writing conferences when I could afford them. And I wouldn't just go passively. I would submit a few pages and get someone to chew my head off and tell me how bad it was. And still they gave great feedback. And I, would cry maybe in my head and come back and do it again. But continuing to get feedback and eventually investing in a writing coach and editor, it was what I needed. And
Yeah.
that really, really helped.
That's amazing. That speaks to me personally, because I'm the type of person, even now I'll admit it, where criticism is hard for me sometimes, because it's hard for me to differentiate between criticism of a thing like my manuscript or a course that I put out or something like that, and criticism of myself and my
Yes.
worth as a human. So how did you differentiate those so that you could receive that criticism?
At first, it's such a good point, Jesse. At first, I did not, so it really felt like it was a personal attack. But I had to tell myself, no, writing is not who I am. It's something I want to do. And it's also a business. And, today I teach book marketing course, and I tell authors I work with, this is not personal to you. This is feedback for your career. And so when I realized that writing is, even though it's a labor of love and art, it is a business, then it stopped. It's not my baby. Writing, our books are not our babies. So when I realized that, it was like, it was okay. They weren't saying it because they were mean people. They were saying it because they knew what was selling and what wasn't. And so I needed, if I was going to invest my time and a few resources in experts, then I needed to hear what they had to say. And they were never wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also important to differentiate a random attack from someone on the internet against your
Right.
work, like a bad review on Amazon,
Right.
versus sitting down with an expert and saying, hey, what are your thoughts? How can we work through this? Because that person on the internet, they have their own stuff going on. They're just projecting whatever they're struggling with on you. But that expert, yeah, they might have harsh critiques. Yeah, they might be a little bit blunt, but their goal is not to tear you down. It's to build you up and to make your writing better and more impactful. So I think that's important for people to remember too.
Such a great point. Absolutely. Absolutely. And all of us will get nasty book reviews by people that never even read our books. There are people who live to get on Amazon and write a 1-star review, and we can't fix that. But when we go to a conference and when we're seeking feedback, those are words that we need to hear. They're not always right. I'm not saying take some random person's advice and rewrite everything. But if you start hearing a trend, it's time to listen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Most of the people that are going to be watching this, they are first-time nonfiction authors, most of them entrepreneurs, but they are totally new to this whole book writing thing. Is there anything else you would share with them to help them get that first draft done and really polished well?
I would say just have in your mind, always think about one reader specifically that you're trying to reach, one person. Like I'm working on a nonfiction work right now, and I have one person in my mind that I want to share the message with. And I keep going, and I do show up as much as I can to the page, but that doesn't mean it's every day, and that's okay. And I try to provide that benefit that I think that they would get from the book. And sometimes it's awful, and that's fine. That's just fine. Give yourself permission for that awful first draft and keep on moving.
I love that. Now, last question. I know this is kind of sideways, but it just something you said reminded me of this. Is it okay for that person that you're writing to be your past self? Because a lot of times people write the things they wish they knew and the journey that they had. So can you write to your past self? Is that okay?
I think that's a fabulous idea. Absolutely. Often we are our own ideal customer. We really are. Our past self, who we were, that hand we wished we could have held at the time, that's who we want to reach. And that's a great way to think about it. So maybe to our younger self, here's what I wish you knew. I'm here for you now, even though I couldn't be then.
I love that as a book title too. You know, to my past self, I'm here for you now. That's such a beautiful title. So Lizbeth,
Exactly.
thank you so much for your time and for your expertise. This was really amazing.
I loved being here, Jessie. Thanks so much for all you do. I appreciate it.